안녕하세요. 이 교수의 인터랙션의 이 교수입니다. 여러분은 협상, 다시 말해서 내고를 잘 하는 편이신가요? 보통 협상이라고 하면 너무 딱딱하게 생각할 수 있는데요. 사실 협상은 우리가 일상 속에서 알게 모르게 아주 많이 경험하고 있습니다. 시장이나 가게에서 가격을 흥정하는 것에서부터 가족들끼리 휴가 일정이나 장소를 조율하는 것, 그리고 직장에서 동료들과 업무를 분배한다거나 나아가서 상급자와 연봉을 협상하거나 승진을 요청하는 데 이르기까지 아주 다양한 형태로 나타납니다. 하지만 저를 비롯해서 많은 분들이 우리의 이익에 대해서 말하는 것을 참 꺼리는데요. 그렇지 않아도 된다고 충분히 나의 이익을 당당하게 말하면서도 서로가 윈윈할 수 있는 따뜻한 협상이 가능하다고 하는 책이 나왔습니다. 바로 승자의 언어인데요. 제가 직접 저자인 뉴욕대학교 경영대 교수 세스 프리먼을 제 채널에서 모시고 책에서 다룬 협상 스킬에 대해서 그리고 한국만의 독특한 문화에 대해서 함께 이야기하는 시간을 가졌습니다. 여러분 함께 보시면서 따뜻하게 윈윈하는 일상 속 협상의 전략을 꼭 배워가시길 바라겠습니다. 그럼 함께 가실까요?
I totally enjoy your book, actually in both languages. I want to share a little bit of background about Korea. Talking about negotiation. So in my country, South Korea, the concept of negotiation is often considered taboo.
Yes.
Because we don't like to say, I want more. So we don't want to talk about our own interests. However, it's getting more and more attention that people want to say that professionally to gain their value, to keep their integrity. But we didn't have any guidance to say that. I believe your book is like full of useful tools and strategies. So thank you. So can you please explain how you came up with this, with the idea of publishing this book?
Well, first, thank you so much. I'm honored and delighted to hear that this may have real value for our Korean readers. And I really want to honor that concern that you were just sharing about being reticent to ask for more, being reticent to really say what one needs. One of the things I mention in the book that the word negotiate comes from the Latin, which literally means not leisure. So for 2,000 years, people from here to ancient Rome have said, this is not fun. We don't enjoy this. This is not leisure activity. So if our readers or prospective readers are anxious or worried, welcome. That is exactly where I and most people around the world begin. And one of my main concerns is a word I so appreciate that you mentioned, and that's integrity. Am I going to lose my integrity? Am I going to be greedy or perceived as greedy or unethical? And my own experience, and this is the experience of thousands of my students and clients around the world, is that if you have a few tools, your integrity, your ethics, your effectiveness, and the quality of the relationship are enhanced for this most important of business skills. It's not the only skill of business.
That's true.
But in every field and every strata of every industry. So you really have to know how to do it.
I want to ask this because my area of research and interest is actually persuasion. I'm a persuasion researcher, scholar. I believe you are like negotiation scholar and, researcher. So what's your take on the differences between the negotiation and persuasion?
Very much so. And it's a great question. If one really wanted to draw a kind of an exaggerated difference between them, one might say that persuasion is unilateral. It's me trying to change your behavior, whereas negotiation is each of us agreeing to something. But I think I think the overlap is so similar. There's so much overlap that I'm actually not even sure if it's useful to draw too much of a difference. And let me give you an example. I was interviewing a doctor in Wales. She was working in an emergency room, and an elderly man 83 years old, was wheeled into her operating room presenting a heart attack. Treats him, stabilizes him, and she says, Mr. Johnson, you have just had a heart attack. We're going to need to take you to the intensive care unit, and you're going to be staying here in the hospital for several days. And he said, no, And she says, well, Mr. Johnson, maybe I wasn't clear. You nearly died. You are in very, very serious health. And so for the next 5 minutes, she tries everything she can think of to tell him, look, you are going to die in the taxi if you go. You cannot go. He's adamant. He says, I am going. No, I'm going. I'm leaving. And she's at her wit's end. And finally, she says, Mr. Johnson, why won't you stay?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, because my dog is all alone back home.
Aww.
Well, if we get a neighbor to take care of your dog, will you stay? He goes, oh, yeah, then I'll stay.
Oh, that easy.
Now, was that persuasion or negotiation? What she did was turn the conversation from what we talk about in the book
Right.
to thinking about his interests. Why does he want what he says he wants? And that's one of the principles that we operationalize with the tools in the book.
I think that goes on your first chapter. You mentioned 3 little words. There's interest, facts, and options. Even 11-year-old boy can get what he seemingly impossible get, right? So can you explain a little bit of this? And which one out of 3, which one do you think is the most important or difficult to achieve?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I would say the first of the 3 little words, interest, facts, options, the first one, interests, is probably the most important because most of us think that negotiation is about more, less, more, less. And the almost jujitsu-like insight is that instead of just fighting each other, both of us can do better if I intentionally ask, why do you want what you say you want? What are your concerns? Help me listen and understand. And that can feel like I'm giving everything away. But as this story of the man with a heart attack illustrates, it's actually a way for both of us to be much more successful. One of my students trained an 11-year-old boy to use this tool in just a half an hour. The little boy was complaining to my student, his babysitter, that he wanted a cat, but his father wouldn't give it to him. And the boy had used all the usual tactics. And the basic idea is first, learn your father's interests as well as your own. Then do some factual research. And then identify creative options in light of your learning that might work for him as well as you. So he does this. And a few days later, he goes to his father and says, Dad, I wonder if we can have lunch together. There's something I want to talk with you about. Well, this is okay. So now they're having lunch. And the boy says, Dad, I want to talk with you about getting a cat. And the father goes, is that what this is about? Look, we've talked about this. I've told you we can't do it. Look, and there are several, the reasons. Your sister's allergic. The house, the cats shed, and I don't want to clean up after them. And you're 11. How do I know you're going to take good care? Dad, those are good things to be concerned about.
Wow.
So I'm learning.
Acknowledged.
And I found out that there's a kind of a cat that doesn't shed and doesn't cause allergic reactions. So he'd be great for my sister and he won't make the mess that you're concerned about. And I found this charity online that can lend us a cat for a month so you can see if I take good care of it.
Hard to say.
Then we're getting a cat. He's 11 years old. He learned this in a few minutes. I didn't even teach it to him. So that's an example of how powerful this stuff is. If an 11-year-old can do this, anyone can.
My daughter is 7, and I'm going to hold this video until she becomes 12 or 13.
Me too. Don't tell my daughter. She wants to get a dog. I don't want to tell her about this.
So I believe you've been a lawyer your entire life. Now you're teaching negotiation for your students. So can you introduce your tactic or tools that you use the most?
My students often say is shockingly helpful for them. And that's simplest of them all. It's the exactly challenge. When you're in an argument, a conflict, or a negotiation, see what happens if 3 times during that conversation, at different times, you say back what the other one is saying in your own words so well that the other one says, exactly. And over and over around the world, my students come back and they say, this is one of the most valuable things I've learned in school. This has made such a difference. And things de-escalate
Mm,
and harmony usually follows. It helps them
right.
reciprocate. It's just, sometimes it's like a miracle drug. Literally, there are studies that show that if you practice this by the bedside of someone who's ill, it shortens the length of illness 20%.
Wow.
It's key to hostage negotiation. It's key to suicide prevention.
Mm.
You name it, this is a universally valuable skill.
Wow. So I'm so glad you brought this up because it's the essence of communication as well, like reflection and also getting the empathy and then saying, I can literally rephrase what you're saying and say, oh, that's what I want. That's what I'm talking about. And
Sure, you know.
yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that's the key. So you've been teaching this subject and I bet you have many different types of people from different cultures. So have you noticed any differences, like cultural differences in terms of negotiation? I'm asking this because, I am leading a book club actually this month with your book, and some of them are housewives who has a job on the side, and some of them are like newly minted PhDs who are on the job market and looking for the professional position. Those who use negotiation most regularly, they said this book is a Bible for them. They can revisit and check what they've been doing well already and what they can improve on. But the other side of like readers that I mentioned earlier, they said they still found somewhat challenging to execute those skills. I think that's a little bit of cultural differences. So have you noticed any similar responses from your readers?
It's a great question. And one of the things that I particularly was concerned about for our conversation today is, yes, what effect do different cultures have on negotiation, and especially Asian cultures?
Yes.
I should tell you that my heart belongs to Asia. I have the great high privilege of teaching students in China every week by the same medium, and I've taught there probably a dozen times.
Wow.
And my daughters are Chinese.
Mm.
So my heart belongs to Asia. So I was particularly curious about that with this book about to be published in Korea. So I did a little learning, and there's actually a fascinating study that I just discovered that compared how Asian negotiators do on job negotiations compared to whites. And what they found was actually the different Asian negotiators do differently. In general, Asian negotiators here in America who are negotiating for a job do about as well as whites do. But when you break down the results of Asian negotiators into those from South Asia, like Vietnam, and those from East Asia, like Chinese-born Chinese, well, guess who does better? It turns out that the Vietnamese negotiators get about $4,000 more in salary than native-born Chinese do.
Wow.
And the reason seems to be concern about relationship and perhaps also deference to hierarchy. That's my inference. That there may be more of a reticence, a reluctance to ask for more. We were just talking about this because maybe that'll hurt the relationship. Maybe I'm low status, you're high status, and that may be more emphasized in certain Asian cultures. And we know that Korea certainly is a high hierarchical culture.
Right.
So one of the reasons I'm especially excited about the book is because there are specific tools that are designed to help readers navigate that and cope with that. Because, I want my students to be fairly and favorably treated. And one of the joys of this work is that I've seen students and trainees who really are nervous, very shy, very reluctant. I've seen them grow more of a sense of agency, empowerment, even as their integrity and their sense of goodness is strengthened. This is not about being mean or disrespectful. It's actually about being more respectful.
That's right.
One additional tool that my students find very valuable is role playing. And this
Mm.
is where you get ready emotionally for the stress of going up to someone you feel has higher status. And before the conversation, you prepare by
Wow.
pretending with a friend who's playing the role of the senior.
Mm.
And you get your act together. You experience it before you experience it. And as you know from having read the book, this is what skilled athletes do before they perform. They role play, they visualize. This is what hostage negotiators do to get ready
Oh.
to deal with someone who's got a gun pointed
Wow.
at the head of a hostage. So role playing is a crucial skill. And if you're worried about going to talk with your boss about this,
Mm.
use the tools and role play. But I'll give you one more. One of the tools in the book is specifically designed to teach readers how to talk up to their boss. Can you imagine telling your boss she's making a fatal mistake? But it turns out that the ability to do that is essential. And indeed, when you can't do that, people die. There are many cases in the 1970s and 80s and 90s where co-pilots knew that their pilots were making a fatal mistake and they didn't know what to do. It was a KAL.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know what to say, the plane crashed.
Okay.
So the aviation industry came up with a solution, and it's cut fatalities 90%. And I've adapted that method into a tool that can allow you to tell your boss, maybe, there may be a problem here, but do it in a way that makes your boss feel even more respected and helped.
Mm.
Well, that's the tool that I'm alluding to. It's an APSO, tension, problem, solution, okay. And what that means is the first thing you do is you say, young son, and you say yes. And
Yes.
just that is important because often in a crisis, it is tempting to just sort of go, oh, I hope things go well. Looks like we're in trouble. And what I discovered was the first thing you got to do is get the boss's attention. And then I tell you about the problem. That's the P, problem. And I say it briefly. Young son, we are due to file a financial report in 2 days to one of our lenders, and we're experiencing a 2-day cash flow shortage. And if we report it now, they could call the loan, and that could collapse our whole business. So that's the problem.
Right.
Then I offer a solution. I suggest that we call the banker now and ask for a 3-day extension, 72 hours instead of 48, based on our excellent track record. Just this once. Okay, what do you think? Now, have I said anything that's disrespectful?
No.
Have I said anything that's personal or that challenges the boss's authority?
No.
And have I offered her a help and deferred to her and told her, it signaled, this is a decision for you to make. What do you think?
I see.
That's the power of this. And even in a crisis, what the aviation industry found was, even if everything is going terribly, you always speak with respect to the captain. You never disrespect. And so this has actually been helpful in all sorts of industries around the world.
Wow. You mentioned so many insights actually, because I can resonate when you mention the role playing part, because I teach public speaking, I teach professional communication to my students. So they have to deliver their own presentations. One of my suggestions for my student when they, practice and prepare their presentations, please rehearse and as you say, as you look on the stage, so you can feel that kind of anxiety and set a live audience, 1 or 2 in front of you, so you can feel the tension, you can feel the anxiety, and that actually helps you to do better on the real situation.
So if you're shy about persuading, about using any of these ideas, one of the things that I've included in the book are ways to practice, little challenges where you can try this out in a safe, simple way. So, for example, one of the things that we find that really helps people be more persuasive is reframing. And reframing is where instead of just saying, you ought to go do this, you say it in a way that appeals to the other's interests, that shows that you've been thoughtfully considering where they are, what their concerns are. So, for example, it is very common in negotiations for inexperienced negotiators to say, I'm making you a fair offer. Now, when was the last time someone said that to you and you went, my God, you're right. You are being fair. What was I thinking? You are so persuasive. Nobody does that. But that's an example of what many people do. It's called an irritator. It's self-serving. It doesn't consider how this sounds. It doesn't work. And the research shows that skilled negotiators avoid irritators like the plague. So nothing we're discussing here, young son, is trying to get people to be very aggressive and mean. And no, quite the opposite. And I'm a New Yorker, so if I can do it, other people can do it. So instead of saying, I'm making you a fair offer, one might say, well, I know you want to be fair, and so do I. And so I did a little learning just to make sure I'm being fair. And I thought it might be useful to share with you some information that I found. And, I wonder if this is useful. Now, I had a student who did exactly that. He was offered a job for, I think it was $80,000 at a big bank. And he was very respectful and grateful and excited. And he said, thank you so much. And let me just, go home and think about it. And he practiced the book. He practiced interest facts options, and part of that was doing research. And he discovered a Wall Street Journal article that said that peer companies were offering their incoming associates $120,000. So what did he do? He went back and he said, I know you want to be fair, and so do I. I'm very excited about this offer. I'm sure we're going to make this work. And I thought you might be interested because I want to be fair. I did a little learning and I found this Wall Street Journal article, and it seems to say that our peer banks are offering $120,000 to incoming associates. I wonder if this would be useful. And the HR executive said, yes, thank you. Let me take a look at this. Thank you. I really appreciate this. And 2 weeks later, my student got a memo to all the incoming candidates saying that he and all of them would get a 55% raise to $125,000.
Wow.
Now, I am not promising that you're going to get a 55% raise. But I can tell you that I've used a similar approach, and it made me one of the best paid professors in the program. And at the end of it, I asked my boss, look, how was this conversation for you? And he said, because you offered me reliable information that benchmarked and showed you were being fair, it made it much easier for me to say yes.
Wow.
Keys to all of this is being hard on the problem, soft on the person, or to put it another way, to be strong and kind. And one of the things I really want to highlight is that we've understandably been talking a lot about compensation, and that's a perfectly valid thing to do. It's so important to our families and our lives. And if you can do this for yourself, and you definitely can, imagine all the additional peace, prosperity, justice, and harmony you can create for those you serve, for your family, for your country. And this is the stuff that can help lead to Nobel Peace Prizes and to families that were breaking up, coming back together and finding harmony and forgiveness. And that's, to me, one of the most delicious things about this. Come for the job negotiation if you want. Stay for the Nobel Peace Prize and the love of your family.
I appreciated the way you ended your book. I actually loved the last chapter of your whole book, because now I see your whole point of this book. You're not just telling your readers and people to win, get what you want. You are talking about why we have to get what we want to get, and we can do that warmly, right? The last chapter, you literally mentioned that I am powerless.
Yes.
Could you elaborate a little bit more and explain it further?
I wrote that last chapter. As I was writing the book, I realized, when one writes a book about negotiation, one is really talking about power, and one can use power for good or for ill. You could use power to win a Nobel Peace Prize. You could also use it to take over the world, God forbid.
Right.
And, in that regard, this is, there's a moral neutrality to this. And I don't want to equip people to do bad things. I'm entrusting them with something quite powerful, but it's up to them to know how they choose to use it. And in that regard, I realized I can't control my readers. I'm powerless in the sense that it's up to them. And the only thing I add, as you know, in the last chapter, is that this stuff doesn't work so well if you're doing it with greedy intentions.
Right.
It really is designed to work best when you're caring for the other as well. And so I can give more of a reassurance to my readers. Yeah, care for others as well, and this stuff will make you shine.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate this. Thank you so much for your insights on negotiation. Do you have any last words for our Korean readers who want to negotiate warmly but still want to have a win-win situation?
My longing is that my readers in Korea will know that I very much appreciate that they have their own culture, they have their own concerns. They may be a little different from other cultures, and this is designed to be adaptable to your circumstances. So I have every confidence that with just a slight adjustment, this can serve you well. And I especially rejoice when my students who feel shy and powerless and afraid find themselves feeling more confident, more empowered, more of a sense of agency and kindness through this work. And I think you'll find that much of the fear turns to powerful effectiveness and grace when you put these tools to intentional use. They're designed to scaffold and guide you, and may it be so. I'm rooting for you all the way.
Thank you.
My great pleasure. Young son,